I would now like to go ahead and introduce to you the featured speakers. Dr. Ethel Goyal has served as a senior director at companies such as Hewlett-Packard and Agilent in areas of R&D, marketing, sales, and manufacturing. He was also the founder and president of Colorado Superconductor, Inc. He holds degrees from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, and Yale University, and currently serves on Yale's AYA Board of Governors. Over the last 25 years, Atul has received over 20 patents in the United States and abroad. Mr. Gunjan Bagla is the managing director of Amritt and has over 25 years of industry experience in marketing and sourcing. He is a mechanical engineering graduate of the Indian Institute of Technology, IIT Kanpur in India, and also holds an MBA with honors from Southern Illinois University. He has previously held senior positions in large corporations as well as been an entrepreneur himself. Based in California, Gunjan is the author of the book, Business in 21st Century India, How to Profit Today from Tomorrow's Most Exciting Market. He has also appeared on the New York Times, BBC TV, and Bloomberg TV. So without further ado, I hand it over to Dr. Ethel Goyal to lead the conversation.
Good morning. Welcome on board. I'm going to take you today through a discussion about doing collaborative research in India. Why would one wish to enter into a collaboration with an India-based research entity or researcher? It can give you access to an IP base or materials that would otherwise be difficult to gain. One could develop a close relationship with an influential researcher or an institution in your domain of interest. You could garner privileged and perhaps unbiased perspectives of an area of your interest in India. In today's webinar, we will use Amritt's experiences in helping its clients in this endeavor to answer the questions: are there Indian researchers or institutions who could contribute collaboratively to your own developmental activities? Is there valuable proprietary knowledge or IP that you can acquire from Indian sources? Can India be a viable source of unique materials or ingredients that could make a difference in your product developmental ecosystem? So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the Indian R&D landscape. On the next slide, we're going to discuss just how big R&D is in India. India really has a very large R&D establishment. Increasingly, this establishment is focused on delivering value to the Indian society and Indian economy. India is one of the leading producers of engineers and scientists. Many of these engineers are employed by Western firms or by Indian engineering service providers. But some of the leading scientists and engineers are employed by the strong university system and work in select government labs. These two institutions continue to be attractive to some of these best and brightest people. So collaboration can give you access to some of these institutions and these very bright individuals. The Indian government is very determined to improve the future of its people through escalating investments in science and technology. In fact, one of the issues that Amritt has seen is the level of funding in India is increasing so rapidly at universities that a putative collaborator from industry really has to offer something of value, especially, if possible, a demonstration that the collaboration will lead to something tangible, to products, if possible, eventually. Let's look at how Indian government R&D labs are structured, how the Indian R&D effort that is sponsored by the government looks like. India has about 380 universities that perform research and issue PhD degrees. Many of these are world-class, quite well-known universities. In addition to this, there are a large number of government agencies, the most famous of which is CSIR, the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. CSIR has 40 labs spread across India. There's the Department of Science and Technology, the Defense Organization, and one that's gained a lot of prominence lately is the Indian Council of Medical Research. This org chart is an example of linked Indian labs that do research or sponsor research in the medical arena. As you can see, CSIR is one of those organizations that's involved in medical research. And then there's the Indian Council of Medical Research, which is very prominent in its own right. In other domains, there's a similar network of central and state government labs. There are research universities that receive funding from the government. And many of these work hand in hand with commercial firms and state government-sponsored labs. Some of our clients have established close relationships with multiple institutions and have created ad hoc collaborative research networks in the areas of interest. And in doing so, they leverage funding for these institutions from the government and their own inputs for mutual benefit. Let's talk about why Indians are motivated to collaborate. It's pretty evident why you might want to access some of the best talent and also some of the government funding that goes into these labs. But let's look at it from their perspective. India's had a very strong tradition of excellence in education. However, tertiary education has tended to be focused on academic research for research's sake. Well, now there's a very strong push from the Indian government to quickly accrue the benefits of that investment that they make in R&D for the public good. The government feels that one effective approach is to require its funded researchers to collaborate with industry. The government does not draw distinctions in this expectation between industrial partners from Indian or foreign firms. They just want their labs and universities to collaborate. Despite the cultural and sometimes communications challenges of working with a foreign entity, many researchers in India are motivated by the potential to have their students and sometimes themselves travel abroad. For instance, to work for a while in the Western company's labs, or to co-author papers with their employees and to attend conferences with the employees. Frankly, another issue that still bedevils some Indian research outfits is access to equipment. So the motivation here is that if they collaborate with a Western firm or a Western entity, they might be able to access that equipment. Now, while I've mainly talked about collaborations with research institutions in India, several of Amritt's clients have formed very effective and productive collaborations with product companies' labs. We find that this development over the last few years to have some very exciting potential. To enter into a collaboration, many of our clients find that they want to scout the technology potential. They want to do technology scouting. So they go out, they ask us to look for opportunities where they can access technology or science, or in some cases just ingredients that are unique, naturally sourced ingredients. Ultimately, a first-time collaboration may be difficult to establish. However, if the Western firm establishes a reputation for collaboration or has a brand name associated with the research, the path forward becomes much simpler. So now let's do a little deeper dive in the next slide into why you would want to collaborate. I touched upon that a little earlier, but let's talk about what is in it for you. Our other clients have found that the fruits of collaboration with Indian entities often goes well beyond developmental work. These clients have also gained value from finding novel indigenous ingredients, getting a chance to talk to and influence key opinion leaders, influence policy direction in various areas, because many of the people that you collaborate with are prominent in their own right, have a standing in their domains. You can get introductions to important institutions or individuals who are associated with the individuals with whom you collaborate. You get a visibility for developments in your field of interest throughout India because the people you interact with or the research organizations are nodes for that particular domain. And if you do a really good job, you can get visibility for your brand, an opportunity to promote your brand, and in some very prestigious company. Of course, getting into a collaboration, you need to identify what your end goals are. So you need to do a thorough investigation of the landscape and the different alternatives that you have for collaboration. Those of our clients that are developing a corporate R&D culture around a framework of open innovation are often the most flexible in adapting their R&D projects to the particular opportunities that present themselves following a scouting, a technology scouting, or a landscape investigation in India. So Supriya, if you have the time, I'd like to see if there are any questions from the audience at this stage.
Yes, hi. Atul, we do have one question, but before we do that, we had a few folks who joined a little late, and I would like to let them know that they can send us questions using the webinar applet. There is a pane there which allows you to send us questions, and we encourage questions from all of you throughout the session. So the question, I think, is related to, Atul, to what you were talking about with regards to Indian universities and collaboration, and it's what are the IP practices of Indian universities in a collaboration with industry?
Right, that's a very good question. Many of you who are familiar with working with American universities have come across the question of IP ownership. When you do collaborative research with a university, universities have now established a regime in which it's predefined as to who owns the IP and what licensing rights that you have. Indian universities are still early in their understanding of IP rights. They are beginning to become more sophisticated, especially the more prominent ones. But often the IP ownership discussion is left to the principal investigator, to the researcher, and the decision as to how IP will be owned is done in combination with the researcher's recommendation and the university's support for that. So there is still an opportunity there to negotiate how the IP would be owned. But over time, we're seeing that universities are getting more sophisticated. They're learning from their American counterparts. So the direction that IP is moving in India, in the Indian research universe, is more towards an American model. Kunjan, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I think that's a great summary, Atul. And unless there's another question, Supriya, we can move on to the case studies.
Yes, I think we should move on given the time, interest of time as well.
So we have a couple of case studies here that Atul and I would like to discuss with you. Many people think of India as the place where you go to get software work done, and while there is a lot of software and IT related activity, the spectrum of support for R&D collaboration really spans the entire realm of activity, whether it is chemical products, mechanical designs, aerospace, defense, you name it. Many of our clients are in the food and personal products and chemical industries. So we have a case study here of a company that had about 300 people in their R&D function. And Atul, would you like to tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, this was actually a very, sorry about that. This was a very interesting interaction that we had with a company that was interested in accessing unique materials from India. India, being a very large natural ecosystem, has a tremendous range of ingredients available for consumer goods, for foodstuffs, and so they were interested in looking at the landscape for ingredients that could enhance their product line. So they asked us to do a landscape study and a technology scouting initially to see if there was something available that they could use. But what this led to was finding that there were companies that were already engaged in their domain accessing some of these materials. So we introduced them to these companies, and they found one particular company that fit their needs quite well. They were already deeply involved in natural products, and furthermore, as their understanding of that company's capability increased, they realized that the company was extremely skilled at chemical formulations. India is a nexus of tremendous chemical capability. It actually is an extremely strong strength of India, just like software is. So they asked this company to start doing formulations for them, to look at the natural ingredients and modify them and make them a part of a product that they then took from this company and introduced into their own markets. This collaboration has actually expanded quite a bit, and they're going into adjacent areas with that particular company. And they're also beginning to look at other institutions that can provide support for that product line and some other adjacent product lines. This has been a very effective and profitable move for them.
Do you think we can share something about the difficulties and challenges that this company faced, or the surprises they encountered as they dealt with India?
India is an extremely large market for goods, so many of the companies that they interacted with, their primary interest initially was not collaborating or working with an American company. The growth in India, the growth in Indian markets is so tremendous that their own business was more than sufficient to occupy their interest. However, when we started working with them and showing both companies the benefits of working together, the Indian company gravitated to the perspective that there was a lot of value in interacting with the US-based company, partly for their goods. They felt that there was a market for their goods that were non-competing with that company in the US. And of course, the US company could see a lot of value in working with them. But that visibility that there was a company that would be wanting to collaborate with them and would be of tremendous strategic value, that visibility did not exist if they were to go out, if they had gone out simply and said, is there somebody who is available for doing this kind of work for us?
Exactly. It really wasn't about the money for either company. It was really about something bigger and more significant than that. And we at Amritt had to spend some time understanding, what was that true linkage between the two entities. So let's move on to the next case study that we've entitled Company J. And the Company J is a very different kind of outfit. This is a much larger entity. revenues well over $10 billion, and a very different situation that I think Atul can describe for us. Go ahead, Atul.
Right. So this is a company that has a thriving business in the U.S. They're in a industry that is growing tremendously, and furthermore, they've actually been effective in gaining market share from their rivals. So they're in a situation where they have just too much to do, and they have some work going on in outsourcing some of their R&D activities. But the real fear that they had was because they were in such an attractive space that there was potential for disruptive entry into their core business. They had a skill set that was relatively focused on the industry that they had traditionally worked in, but they did not have much knowledge outside their own core area, and that's where they expected a disruptive attack. They felt that they were not in a position to quickly become experts in this peripheral area from which they would get the disruptive attack. So they asked us whether there would be a potential for working with Indian entities, Indian research entities, universities that could give them a quick leg up into that arena, something that was somewhat still long range and speculative for them. So we did a landscape study, and we surprised them with a very significant roster of researchers who were in that domain. And they have since then formed alliances with several of them. In a couple of university cases, they actually are helping fund the research, and it has given them a perspective and a potential for blunting any disruptive attack in this peripheral area. They are looking at potentially creating some products that may come from this technology that they are now being able to access in its early stages from Indian institutions. One of the other things, that this company actually looks like it will go on and establish a pure research center in India at some point. They feel that by doing this, not only will they improve the quality of collaboration, they've actually got a small center set up right now where they're doing collaborative work, but they're thinking of establishing a larger permanent research center, a lab, that this small venture would grow into. One of the benefits is that by this close collaboration, they're going to get access to some of the brightest students that are going to be coming out of the university that are working on these projects. So it gives them a leg up in an area that people are struggling, fighting for good talent.
Yes, in fact, I was in India with one of the senior executives of this company visiting the labs at one of the IITs, and they were able to establish contact with one of their postdocs who was finishing work and make an offer to this individual almost on the spot. And this was over a year ago, and now that individual has moved to Europe, working at one of our client locations on a 2-year project. So many pleasant surprises can result from such interactions.
Good. Gunjan, do you have anything that you'd like to add in addition to that about this company?
I think that's good. Let's move on.
Let's move on. I think we have time for. Do we have time for a brief poll? Supriya?
I think we don't. We are kind of running short on time. So if we can continue on, and we can, that way we'll leave some time for questions at the end as well.
Okay. Let's go ahead and talk about how ready your company is for collaboration. Increasingly, we're finding that the most innovative companies are looking at frameworks like open innovation to open up their R&D practices, especially when they're looking outside the box as to how they can work with completely separate entities in some collaborative fashion. This collaborative fashion, there may be no actual exchange of funds across between the two entities, but doing things that are complementary of mutual interest. So it's a very different kind of thing than outsourcing or setting up an R&D center with a focused engineering or product objective in the short term. So one of the questions that you have to ask is your company ready? One of the things that companies should do is look at these kind of engagements as exploratory, as scouting or landscape investigations. The people that are involved from the Western side should be very capable, respectable, respected in their domains, because the people that you will be interacting with on the Indian side are also very well known, very prominent, often with good Western contacts. More than any kind of traditional outsource or joint venture, what we have found is that a collaborative engagement is better served with a stepped approach, with a trial or learning project as the first step. This allows both of the parties to get familiar with each other and with their work styles and shake out any procedural and other issues. Now, this type of an engagement has goals that are both near-term and long-term. So product division sponsors may have difficulty committing to multi-year engagements. They want engagements where are tangible results within 6 months or 12 months. And so it wouldn't happen with these collaborations. Often have results that may take 2 years to come about. So we feel that corporate level funding is very valuable, especially if the collaborator on the Indian side is a university. Since more than any other kind of developmental engagement, this is a relationship-driven venture, frequent and regular communications are key. In fact, in the early stages, frequent travel by both parties should be planned and encouraged. The funding that you would put into this should, in some cases, should include sponsorship for travel of the university collaborator to the US or elsewhere. These small amounts of funding can actually go a very long ways. Due to the fact that the collaborators, as a part of the very nature of this type of engagement, have other responsibilities and will never be full-time on your work, setting concrete goals with well-defined deliverables is very important. So this is one of the things that on your side you should be very clear about and be capable of doing, is setting those deliverables even for these longer term collaborative engagements. There are many challenges, so we'll talk about that in the next slide, for a good collaborative engagement with Indian entities. So as I mentioned earlier, the collaboration often happens with researchers who have other priorities. If it's a university, teaching could be one. One of the questions that has come up previously is about IP ownership in universities. Indian research institutions are still in the early stages of establishing operating regimes for IP ownership. It's not a bad thing, because if anything, right now, the IP ownership rules are in favor of Western entities. They're not quite as demanding as US universities. If you're working with a university, a collaboration means that the US entity will be absorbing a greater share of the funding. It's still very economical. It's surprising how much cheaper it is working with an Indian university. One of the things about working with a university, just like in the US, you have to remember that a lion's share of the investment that you make will go to the university overhead and not to the PI, the principal investigator's lab. So the way you structure it is very important. There are some very interesting things that we've come across that universities do that we've helped our clients do to make sure that a majority of the funding actually gets focused on the research. It's a challenge quite similar to that in the US, working with US universities, but the solutions obviously are different. So let's talk about some of the next steps. If you wish to engage in a collaborative venture in India, we suggest that you draw up a very practical plan with well-defined goals and expectations. At the same time, in a controlled way, given the nature of this engagement, you need to be flexible and adapt to the exact situation that is presented to you. This is in keeping with the traditions of open innovation. There is a tremendous and growing opportunity for doing developmental work in India. There's a lot of manpower, a lot of skills, and a tremendous amount of funding that is going into government research institutions that through collaboration you can get some access to. What we guide our clients at Amritt is to go through a detailed landscape investigation as a first step in the staged engagement process. That really does work very well. Thank you. Supriya, do we still have time for questions?
Yeah, we actually have a quiet audience today, so I don't have anything else from the audience unless Gunjan has some information to share.
Well, Atul, would you like to talk a little bit about where we see this going in the future? Do collaborations, will collaborations with Indian entities tend to increase? People often ask us about China, relative to India. Shall we talk a minute about that?
Yes, I think that's a really good idea. Both Indian and Chinese universities are experiencing a tremendous growth. It's happening from two sides. One is that they're seeing a growth in the demand for education. So there's a tremendous influx of students into universities. And associated with that, the funding levels are going up, both public and private. Government funding for research at these universities that are growing is going up at a terrific pace. Last year, for example, the funding at Indian universities went up by 22%. And as I mentioned earlier, there's pressure on these universities and research institutions to collaborate because the government wants to start seeing practical benefits of their investment. So we see a growth in the desire to collaborate in the collaborative ventures from the Indian side. And from the US side, the more far-seeing corporations recognize that by collaboration, they can get a very privileged access to India. They can get value that goes well beyond the specifics of the collaboration. So in a somewhat long way, to answer your question, Gunjan, I think you're going to see a lot of growth in this area in India.
Thanks, Atul. And we do have a question that has come in. Do you have any different advice for startup companies wanting to collaborate or find resources in India?
So I'm assuming that these are companies that are startups in the US that would want to collaborate in India.
Yes, that's what it sounds like.
Right. This is a really interesting question. We've been faced with this question before. It's an interesting approach to entering India, but one of the things that you have to be careful about is that a collaboration involves bringing something to the table. So the question is, what are you bringing to the table? Are you, if you're a startup, do you have the ability to bring funding to the table if it's a research university? If not, do you have a very prestigious name somehow associated with you that would be of value? There's a branding aspect to it. Do you have a connection to a U.S. university that you can bring to the table as a part of the collaboration? There is some value as a startup going and working with an Indian organization in a collaborative mode. You can certainly access funding or the value of funding from the Indian side, but again, you do have to bring something of your own. And then, as a startup, I have seen from my experience, you tend to be more open-minded in what you're doing. That's where your disruptive potential lies. So by taking this additional step of collaborating, you can actually access technologies and ideas that a larger company may be more impervious to, and that would give you an added competitive boost.
Yes, Atul, and I would like to add to that. There's one area we didn't really cover very much in today's webinar, but it's certainly an option for venture-funded startups. There is technology and IP that has been developed by Indian entities, both companies as well as universities, that sometimes they don't really have an outlet or market for in India because they don't see a method to get it out into the local market. But that technology may well apply to the U.S. market, and we are certainly aware of U.S. venture funds that have gone to the IITs or to the CSIR labs looking to acquire the rights to some technologies and bring them to the U.S. market. Right. That's definitely a possibility for a startup. So it is a form of collaboration, but essentially you are getting a jump start by exploring something that your larger peers in your market might not have thought about. Right. I know that there was a database-oriented company that bought the rights to technology developed at IIT Kharagpur about 4 years ago, and has since gone on to make a product based on it.
Right. Actually, Gunjan, that's a very interesting comment that you just made. What we have found, and this is somewhat tangential to the discussion over here, is that smaller startup companies are more efficient in the use of IP, more efficient in the use of patents. And so if there is IP that's available in India that is of interest to them, they're more likely to go and commercialize it because IP is seen in a much more precious way by these small entities when it's available. So that too is an incentive to the Indian company or the Indian organization to collaborate with the small company, because the likelihood of that leading to an actual product is probably higher.
Great. I think we are done with the webinar. We don't have any other questions coming in, and we are also kind of getting to the end of our time. So I would like to thank you, Atul and Gunjan, for leading the discussion today and for your insights. And thank you, everyone else, for attending the webinar today. We hope it was informative for you. If you do have any additional questions, please email us at usa@amritt.com. That's USA@amritt.com. As you exit the webinar, you will be asked to complete a brief survey, and we would appreciate